The alien baron ruled his world with a cold iron will, measured not by compassion, but by the flawless beauty of his empire. In his eyes, weakness was an infection, and imperfection a crime deserving exile. His legacy demanded heirs forged in symmetry, bodies built to mirror strength, and minds trained to wield authority like a weapon. Yet in the shadows of his fortress lived a daughter who did not fit his vision. She had been born with a twisted leg that forced her to limp, a frail frame that set her apart from her siblings, and eyes that shimmered with a strange light he despised but never understood. To the Baron, she was a reminder of failure. To her, he was the towering figure who decided she would never belong. From the moment she could walk, she felt the weight of his disdain. Others were trained to command fleets, but she was hidden away, mocked, and silenced whenever she spoke of dreams. Yet there was something within her, something she could never name, an energy that hummed in her bones when she was alone. She had once lifted a shard of metal without touching it, only to be struck when her father caught her. He claimed it was corruption, not power, and swore it would be buried forever. When the decree came, it was delivered without ceremony. The Baron's hand gripped her thin arm as he dragged her through the fortress gates, his words sharper than any blade. She was a disgrace, he told her, a blemish upon his legacy. His court watched in silence as he forced her toward the edge of the endless desert. No farewell, no pity, only a sentence disguised as judgment. He released her into the scorching wind and turned away as if she had already ceased to exist. The heat struck her immediately. Sand burned her feet through thin cloth, and her throat tightened with thirst after only a few steps. The sky above blazed white, the horizon a shimmering mirage that offered no escape. Each movement sent pain through her leg, but she pressed forward, the memory of her father's scorn heavier than the sun itself. Behind her, the walls of the fortress faded into the haze. Before her, nothing but endless dunes stretched into eternity. She stumbled often, hands sinking into scorching grains as her body weakened. Hunger clawed at her. Thirst cut deeper with every breath. She thought of the stories whispered among servants of creatures that prowled beneath the sands, scaled beasts that rose when the weak faltered. Every shadow at the edge of her vision seemed to confirm them. Yet worse than beasts was the silence. No voice, no sound but the hiss of wind, no hope of return. Her father had not simply cast her out, he had chosen her death. She tried to fight despair by recalling fragments of her mother's lullabies, long lost to her memory. The melodies faded as quickly as they surfaced, drowned by the crackle of heat. Each time she fell, she told herself to rise again, but her body betrayed her. Her leg dragged, her chest heaved, and her skin blistered under the relentless sun. She wondered if this was how all unwanted things ended, consumed quietly by the desert, remembered by no one. Night fell, and brought no mercy. The air grew cold, and the stars above pierced her with their distance. She curled against a dune, trembling, her breath shallow. A faint hum stirred within her chest, the same strange presence she had once felt when she was young. But it offered no warmth, no salvation, only a reminder of what she might have been if her life had not been stolen before it began. Days blurred into each other. She measured time only by the rise and fall of the sun. Her lips cracked, her body shrank, and each step became agony. Yet she pressed forward because stopping meant surrendering to the Baron's decree, and some stubborn fragment of her spirit refused to give him that victory. Even as her strength failed, something deeper pulled her onward. On the third day, her vision dimmed until the desert became a whirl of shifting shapes. The ground tilted beneath her, and she fell to her knees, unable to rise. Heat shimmered around her, twisting into forms that were not real. She thought she saw her father standing above her again, his gaze sharp and merciless. She wanted to scream at him, but her throat had no sound left to give. Her body gave way, and she collapsed face first into the burning sand. The world narrowed to a single point of darkness. Her chest rose shallowly, then faltered. She no longer had the strength to crawl, nor the will to imagine tomorrow. For the first time, She accepted the truth her father had spoken. Perhaps she was worthless, destined to be forgotten in the desert heat. Then, through the blur, something shifted. A shadow fell across her, tall and solid, blocking the sun from her blistered skin. The ground shook faintly under steady steps. A calloused hand touched her shoulder, turning her gently. A voice, unfamiliar yet firm, spoke words she could barely hear but somehow understood. Cool water brushed her lips, a taste so foreign it jolted her fading senses. She blinked, struggling to see, and caught the outline of a figure not shaped like her kind. Rough clothing, weathered features, eyes that did not judge but regarded her with curiosity. The last thing she knew before darkness claimed her was that someone had found her, someone who had not turned away. The first sensation she recognized was water. Cool against her lips, bitter in taste but life itself in a world of heat. She forced her eyes open, expecting to see the desert sky. Instead, the sight that greeted her was strange, unfamiliar. A man sat nearby, not alien like her father's kind but human, his skin sun-worn, his clothing patched, his hands calloused from labor. His presence felt foreign, yet steady, grounded in a way she had never seen before. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he watched her carefully, as though weighing whether she had the strength to rise. When at last she stirred, his voice reached her, low and steady, carrying no contempt. He asked no questions about her deformity, made no cruel remark about her weakness. He simply offered more water, holding it with care so she would not waste a drop. For a moment she could only stare, uncertain whether this was kindness or another trick of the desert. Her throat burned as she forced out words, whispering that she had been cast away. The human listened without interruption, eyes narrowing but not in judgment. He said nothing of pity, nothing of disgust. Instead, he studied her as though searching for something beyond the surface. His gaze lingered not on her twisted leg but on her eyes, where faint traces of hidden light still flickered. She turned away, ashamed, but he did not let her shrink. His silence carried weight, not of condemnation but of consideration. She asked why he bothered with her at all. He shrugged, as if the answer required no explanation. To him, leaving her behind was not an option. In his world, life held worth simply by being alive. The simplicity of that truth startled her. Her father had always told her she was a burden, a flaw to be erased. Yet this stranger treated her as though survival alone was reason enough to fight. The days that followed were a blur of hardship and discovery. He carried her when her body faltered, shared what little food he had, and shielded her from the brutal sun. His strength was not the polished might of her father's warriors, but something quieter, resilience forged through struggle. He was no lord, no commander, no heir of empire. Yet his endurance carried them both farther than she believed possible. In silence she studied him. His scars told stories of battles fought not for glory, but for survival. He seemed small compared to the towering figures of her world, yet there was nothing small about the way he met adversity. Where others would measure worth by power, wealth, or bloodline, he measured it by persistence. Each time she faltered, he encouraged her to take one more step, drink one more drop, breathe one more breath. At night, when firelight flickered against the dunes, he asked her about her past. She spoke haltingly of the barren, of the contempt that had marked her life, of the exile that had left her to die. The man listened without flinching. Then, quietly, he told her she had survived what many could not. To him, that survival alone proved she carried more strength than her father ever admitted. His words unsettled her, not because they were harsh, but because they held belief. The bond between them deepened in unspoken ways. He taught her small lessons that seemed trivial but mattered greatly in the desert. How to spot shifts in the sand that meant danger. How to ration foods so hunger did not consume her. How to use shadows for cover when the heat grew unbearable. Each lesson was practical, but more than that, each one reminded her that weakness did not mean helplessness. With knowledge came power, and with power came the first flicker of confidence she had ever known. It was during one such lesson that he noticed something extraordinary. As she reached for a stone, it slid closer without her hand touching it. She froze, certain he would recoil in fear. Instead, he leaned forward, eyes bright with curiosity. He asked her to try again. Reluctantly, she did, and once more the stone shifted. Panic surged through her, recalling the punishment she had suffered when her father discovered the same ability years ago. But the human's reaction was not anger. It was awe. He told her that what she held inside was not corruption, nor flaw, but potential. A gift that her father had feared, not despised. He spoke of how power often frightened those who could not control it, and how those same people would rather destroy it than let it grow. His words struck her like a blade through the fog of doubt. For the first time, she considered that her father's hatred was not born of her weakness, but of his fear. That night, she lay awake, replaying his voice in her mind. A stranger who owed her nothing had seen more in her in a few days than her own blood had in years. His belief unsettled her, but it also ignited something she thought long dead. A possibility that she was not broken. A chance that her worth was real. The desert stretched endlessly around them, yet with him by her side it no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a place where she could learn who she truly was, beyond her father's shadow. Each step forward no longer belonged to the Baron's discarded daughter. Each step belonged to someone who might yet rise. But the desert was not empty. Distant tremors in the sand whispered of forces drawing near. As they rested beneath the pale light of twin moons, the man caught sight of something she did not. A faint shimmer, as if the ground itself was bending. He watched her carefully, then spoke with calm certainty. She was not what her father claimed her to be. She was something far greater. His words lingered in the air, heavy with promise, as the night closed around them. The desert taught lessons the fortress never could. Survival was not won by cruelty or by perfection, but by endurance and the will to adapt. With the human beside her, she began to see herself differently. He never allowed her to wallow in weakness, never treated her as broken. When she faltered, he offered knowledge instead of scorn. He showed her how to trace the stars to find direction, how to read the wind to predict storms, how to listen to silence to sense approaching danger. Each skill he shared was a thread woven into a new strength she had never possessed. She grew restless with questions about why he helped her. He always answered the same way, because leaving her would mean losing someone who mattered, even if she did not yet believe it herself. Those words rooted inside her, clashing with years of her father's hatred. She carried them with her during each grueling step across the sand. The more she held onto them, the less her father's voice haunted her. One evening, the desert revealed its cruelty in a way neither of them expected. A storm rose with little warning, winds tearing the sky apart, grains of sand cutting like blades. The man dragged her beneath the shelter of a fractured rock formation, but the storm pressed closer, collapsing dunes with thunderous force. As the air thickened, she felt the same hum in her bones that had frightened her as a child. This time, it grew stronger, louder, as if answering the desert itself. The storm surged, threatening to bury them alive. In her panic, she raised her hands instinctively. Energy burst outward, invisible yet undeniable, parting the sand before it crushed them. The force held, a trembling shield that saved their lives. When the wind died down, she collapsed, breath ragged, terrified of what she had done. She expected the man to recoil, to see her as cursed. But instead, he knelt beside her and spoke with steady certainty. What she had unleashed was not a curse. It was proof of who she truly was. He refused to let fear guide her. In the days that followed, he encouraged her to practice. At first she resisted, dreading the memories of punishment, but his persistence broke through. They began small. A pebble shifting across the ground. A faint ripple in the air. A sensation of threads she could tug and bend with her will. Each success filled her with wonder and dread in equal measure. She trembled each time, not from weakness, but from the weight of possibility. He reminded her that no gift had meaning until it was mastered. He taught her patience, pushing her to try again when she failed, steadying her when her power surged beyond control. He placed his trust in her, not as a burden, but as a partner in survival. That trust changed her more than any lesson. For the first time, someone believed in her without condition. His belief became the foundation on which her courage grew. Her abilities expanded quickly. She learned to move objects without touch, to sense the emotions of creatures lurking in the desert, to feel the subtle tremors of energy flowing through the ground. She discovered she could weave that energy into a shield, fragile at first but strengthening with each attempt. Though her body remained frail, her mind blazed with power. She was no longer the discarded daughter limping in the sand. She was something her father had tried to bury because he feared it might rise. The human watched her progress with a quiet pride. He told her that strength was not measured by the perfection of the body, but by the resilience of the spirit. His words sank deep, carving away the lies she had carried since childhood. For every insult her father had spat, the man offered truths that replaced them. Where she had once been told she was worthless, she now heard that she was necessary. Where she had been told she was broken, she now heard she was unshaken. Still, doubts lingered. At night, she confessed her fear that her powers would consume her, that she was no better than the monsters whispered about in tales. The man only shook his head. Power was a tool, he said. It was choice that defined its purpose. He believed she would choose wisely because she had already proven that survival mattered to her more than cruelty ever could. His conviction steadied her in ways she had never thought possible. Their bond deepened as the days stretched on. She found herself laughing quietly at his dry humor, sharing pieces of herself she had never spoken aloud. She told him about dreams she once had, of seeing beyond the fortress walls, of traveling the stars. He listened as though every word mattered. And in return, he told her of Earth, of mountains and rivers, of a place where the weak were not cast away but protected. His stories painted images so vivid she could almost see them in the night sky. For the first time, hope replaced despair. Yet the desert carried more than storms and silence. One evening, while they practiced near a canyon ridge, the man froze, his eyes scanning the horizon. She followed his gaze and saw a faint glimmer of armor catching the last light of the setting sun. Figures moved with discipline, their forms too precise to be wanderers. Recognition struck her like a blow. These were not strangers. They were her father's hunters. The man's jaw tightened as he realized what this meant. The Baron had learned she was alive. Worse, he now knew she was awakening. She felt a shiver course through her, not of fear alone, but of clarity. Her father would never allow her to rise. He had cast her into the desert to erase her, and now that she had survived, he would come with all his strength to finish what he began. The man placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his voice low but unyielding. He told her this was the moment her father feared most, the moment she would stop believing his lies. She looked into the distance, at the approaching soldiers, and felt the hum within her rise again, stronger than before. She no longer wished to hide. She no longer wished to crawl. She wanted to stand. The hunters came swiftly across the dunes, armored in steel and pride, banners snapping in the wind as though the desert itself bent to their will. Their footsteps thundered like a drumbeat of inevitability, carrying the command of the Baron. For her, the sight was both familiar and foreign. She knew the discipline of their ranks, the sharpness of their blades, the mercilessness in their eyes. But now she did not see them as masters. She saw them as obstacles standing between her and the truth she had finally claimed. The human stood at her side, steady and unshaken. His presence reminded her that she was no longer alone. He carried no gleaming weapon, no armor to shield him, yet his resolve radiated stronger than any warlord's. When he looked at her, it was not as a frightened child or broken exile. He looked at her as if she had already become what she was meant to be. That gaze carried her forward when fear threatened to root her to the sand. The soldiers surrounded them with mechanical precision, weapons raised, their commander barking orders. They demanded her return in the name of the Baron. They called her a defect, a runaway, an error that must be corrected through obedience or death. The words once would have shattered her, but now they rang hollow, the echoes of a voice that no longer ruled her. She felt the hum within her body rise again, answering the insult with strength instead of despair. The human's voice broke the silence, calm and fearless. He told them they had no authority here, that she was not theirs to command. Laughter rippled through the soldiers, mocking the arrogance of a lone human standing against them. Yet he did not flinch, and his defiance gave her courage to step forward. She raised her hand, trembling not from weakness, but from power building beneath her skin. The air shifted, grains of sand rising as if lifted by invisible currents. Energy rippled outward, brushing against steel, rattling blades, shaking the certainty of men who had believed they faced only a crippled girl. Their mocking smiles faltered as the ground quivered beneath them. Fear flickered in their eyes, the same fear she had once seen in her father's. For the first time, she understood why he had cast her away. He had not feared her weakness. He had feared her strength. The first clash was sudden. A soldier lunged, blade flashing. Instinct took over. She pushed outward, and the air cracked like a whip. The man was hurled backward, armor screeching against stone as he fell. Others hesitated, then attacked together, hoping numbers could drown her. But she no longer fought alone. The human guided her with sharp words, grounding her when panic threatened to break her focus. She bent her power around their strikes, shields forming from sheer will, weapons tearing from hands before they could strike. What once had been hidden now roared into the open. When the dust settled, silence fell heavy. The soldiers lay scattered, groaning in pain, their formation broken. Yet this was only the beginning. A new presence approached, heavier than the rest. She knew it before she saw him. The Baron himself stepped forward, his armor gleaming black, his voice carrying over the ruined hush of the battlefield. His gaze pierced her, sharp and merciless, just as it always had. He called her by no name, only by the word he had always used, failure. His words struck with venom, dismissing her survival as accident, her power as corruption. He claimed she was nothing without him, that her life was his to shape or destroy. For a moment, the old fear stirred within her, pulling at the chains he had wrapped around her since birth. Her body trembled, and doubt crept in like poison. But the human stepped closer, his hand firm on her shoulder. His voice cut through the storm of her father's lies. He reminded her that survival had been her own, that the strength she wielded came not from bloodline, but from will. That worth was never given by tyrants, it was chosen by those who refused to break. His words struck deeper than any blade. She realized the truth. Her father's power was built on control, and the moment she rejected it, it crumbled. The Baron attacked, his strikes heavy and relentless, but she no longer cowered. She moved with certainty, deflecting his blows with waves of energy, standing firm where once she would have fallen. His voice rose in fury as his attacks failed, screaming denials, clinging to the illusion of dominance. She met his rage with calm, her shield steady, her power flowing like a river unbound. And when the moment came, she did not strike to kill. Instead, she tore the weapon from his grasp and cast it into the sand. He stood before her, stripped of authority, exposed for the fragile man he truly was. She looked into his eyes and saw not the immovable force of her childhood, but a tyrant terrified of losing control. The strength she had sought in his approval no longer mattered. She no longer needed it. The soldiers who remained lowered their weapons, uncertain, shaken by what they had witnessed. Their loyalty faltered as they watched the Baron defeated not by might of arms, but by the daughter he had tried to erase. She did not raise her hand against them. She simply turned away, her silence louder than any command. The human walked beside her, their steps slow but steady as they left the battlefield behind. For the first time, the horizon did not feel endless and empty. It felt open, wide with possibility. She had been abandoned to die in the desert, but she had risen stronger than anyone expected. Her worth had never been measured by perfection, but by survival, by choice, by the courage to keep moving when the world demanded she fall. As the dunes stretched before them, she felt no weight of exile, no sting of rejection. She carried instead the certainty that her life belonged to her alone. The man beside her had given her the truth her father never could, that strength was not cruelty, and destiny was not dictated by blood. She was not a discarded child. She was the beginning of something her father had feared too much to imagine. And as the wind rose again, carrying the last echoes of the Baron's reign into the distance, she walked forward unafraid.